The afternoon sun burned down on the crowded streets of Manila, where life moved fast and people barely noticed the small details around them. Among the chaos stood a barefoot boy named Mateo, his clothes worn and his feet dusty from wandering the pavements all day. In his hands, he held an old guitar, its strings uneven, its body scratched and cracked. Yet, for him, it was more than just an instrument, it was the last memory of his father, who once sang him lullabies before life became too heavy. Most people hurried past, glancing at him briefly, assuming he was just another street kid trying to survive. But when Mateo sat down on the corner and began to strum, something remarkable happened. The familiar chords of Hotel California floated into the air. His small fingers struggled with the strings, but his voice carried something that no one could ignore. It was not polished, not trained, but it was raw. Full of truth, longing, and a hidden strength that seemed too big for a child his age. The sound cut through the noise of car horns, vendors shouting, and footsteps rushing by. A few passers-by slowed down, surprised to hear such emotion in a place where hope was often scarce. For Mateo, it wasn't about money or applause. It was about keeping his father's memory alive, about reminding himself that even on cracked streets and empty stomachs, music could still give him wings. In that moment, his song turned the pavement into a stage. In the days that followed, Mateo's song didn't just vanish into the noise of the streets. A traveler who had stopped to listen had quietly recorded him, posting the video online without Mateo even knowing. Within days, the clip spread like wildfire, thousands of people sharing the voice of the little barefoot boy with the broken guitar. His eyes closed in concentration, his trembling voice singing Hotel California, touched hearts far beyond the streets of Manila. One morning, as Mateo strummed in his usual corner, a woman approached him. She carried a smile and a piece of paper, an invitation. Mateo could barely read the words, but he understood one thing: he was being given a chance to sing on a stage he had only seen on the television shop screens he walked past at night. When the day finally arrived, Mateo stood at the edge of a grand international talent show stage. The lights blinded him, the crowd buzzed with anticipation, and his bare feet pressed nervously against the polished floor. The guitar he held was not his father's old one, but a new instrument gifted to him for the performance. Still, the memory of the cracked, broken guitar weighed in his heart. The judges exchanged polite glances, expecting little from the shy boy standing before them. But as Mateo lifted the guitar and prepared to play, no one realized that the same street voice that had once stopped strangers in their tracks was about to silence an entire arena. Mateo's fingers shook as he strummed the opening chords, but the moment his voice broke through the silence, the arena shifted. The first line was soft, almost hesitant, yet filled with something deeper than skill. It carried his story. Each lyric of Hotel California echoed with the memory of his father, who had taught him the song during nights when laughter still filled their small home. The boy closed his eyes, and with every word, it felt as though he was singing not just to the crowd, but to the man he longed to see again. The audience, who moments earlier had been restless, leaned in closer. The hum of whispers faded until only Mateo's trembling but soulful voice remained. His pain, his hope, his innocence, all poured into the melody, raw and unfiltered. One judge bit her lip, fighting back tears, while another leaned forward, gripping the edge of his desk as though the boy's voice had reached someplace he had long forgotten. By the time Mateo reached the chorus, the arena was utterly silent, a silence that didn't come from boredom but from awe. Every note carried more weight than his fragile body seemed capable of holding. He wasn't just singing a song, he was telling the world his truth. And in that truth, strangers thousands of miles away from his streets felt their own hearts tremble. The judges exchanged glances, and in their eyes was the unmistakable realization: this boy was something extraordinary. The final note lingered in the air, fragile yet unshakable, before dissolving into silence. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then, as if released from a spell, the entire arena erupted in thunderous applause. Tears streamed down faces in the audience, and even the judges seemed overwhelmed, their carefully crafted composure shattered by the raw honesty of Mateo's performance. One judge, his voice breaking as he tried to speak, pushed back from his chair. His eyes glistened, and before anyone could predict it, he slammed his palm down on the golden buzzer with such force it rattled the panel. The button cracked slightly, confetti exploded from the ceiling, and the hall roared with joy. Mateo flinched at first, wide-eyed and unsure if he had done something wrong, but then the sparkling rain of gold surrounded him like a blessing. The boy clutched his guitar tightly to his chest, tears spilling freely. In the chaos of the cheers, he whispered softly, almost to himself, "For you, Papa." His voice was lost under the sound of the crowd, but in that moment, it didn't matter. Everyone in the room felt it. The judges rose to their feet, clapping furiously, some wiping tears from their eyes. The judge who had pressed the buzzer stood and pointed toward Mateo, his voice trembling as he shouted above the noise, "This is why we are here. This is why music exists." And with that, the barefoot boy from Manila had turned the world stage into his own backstage. As the lights dimmed and the crowd's roar softened into memory, Mateo sat quietly with his guitar across his lap. He still trembled, not from fear this time, but from the overwhelming weight of what had just happened. Moments later, the judge who had slammed the golden buzzer walked in. Gone was the stern face of a television personality, his eyes were red, his expression tender. He knelt down to Mateo's level and pulled him into a warm embrace. "You reminded us all tonight," the judge whispered, voice breaking, "that music isn't about perfection or fame. It's about heart. And you have more heart than anyone I've ever seen." Mateo clung to those words like a lifeline, his tears soaking the man's shoulder. For the first time, he felt seen not as a poor boy from the streets, but as someone who mattered. Word spread quickly. Offers poured in from people who wanted to help, scholarships, instruments, even a safe home where he could continue his studies. Mateo's future, once uncertain and fragile, began to glow with possibility. Yet, despite all the promises and excitement, what stayed with him most was the sound of the audience, their voices cheering for him, lifting him higher than he ever thought he could reach. That night, as he lay in bed in a quiet room far from the streets, Mateo closed his eyes and whispered a prayer of thanks. His father's song had carried him here, and now, it would carry him forward.